Welcome in to another Best Bets episode. Big slate this weekend. A couple good games actually tonight, headlined by UCLA at Purdue. Purdue trying to bounce back off their 4-game slide here. But we do have some action for you for the weekend. Before we get into that, just wanted to remind everyone, right? Join the Discord, follow along with the action because we're up how many units now? 39.
I think we're at 35, 36 right now. I don't have it up, but I think it's
Gotcha.
in that area.
Gotcha. Yeah. So make sure you're following along with those. All the player props that we don't talk about on here will be on there. We've done very well in player props. You got the t-shirts still. Got a few left, so get those while you can. Conference tourney previews, another thing we're going to be diving into here. Conference tournaments will be starting some next week, right? And then the big ones the week after that. So we'll be starting to dive into those. And then some other stuff. Obviously, with the NCAA tournament on the horizon, we'll be diving into a lot of stuff tournament related. So stay tuned for that stuff. But as for the games this weekend, we've got a few bets out there and a few leans we're going to discuss. And then an underdog parlay as we did last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I don't know if we did one last week, but anyway, first play we've got Iowa State -4.5 against Arizona. Iowa State really kind of reeling a little bit. They've struggled offensively of late, trying to get some revenge on Arizona after Caleb Love hit the prayer a few weeks ago to send that game to overtime at Arizona, and then Arizona ended up winning in overtime. But we like Iowa State here -4.5.
Yeah, and before I dive into that, just to talk about the conference tournaments just a little bit, definitely going to dive into like the futures market there and just determine where there's some value throughout the tournament. Teams with fortunate paths or not so great paths that we can fade, even down in the mid-major leagues. I'll try to give a few out if I find any value there. And yeah, first conference tournament game is on Sunday. It's actually down in my neck of the woods here. Might swing my way over to a Florida Gulf Coast game for their first first game. They're sitting on the 3 line, so maybe they make some noise. But
A-Sun represent.
But yeah, we'll definitely we'll definitely have a lot of good content for conference tournament stuff. So, but as for the Saturday slate, definitely like Iowa State here. Feels like finally I have a chance to buy this team again. Like I felt like early in the year after they went on an unbelievable run to start the year, kind of felt like there wasn't really much value to be had once conference season began. But now that they're sliding a little bit, I think you can kind of buy them low in this spot. And a lot of it is because of injuries. And, the last 2 games, they didn't have Keyshawn Gilbert, but he's going to be back tomorrow, and haven't had Curtis Jones at 100%. He's been dealing with some kind of sickness. I believe it was pneumonia he was dealing with for the last few games, but he's hopefully 100% for this one. He's been dealing with that for a little bit now. So got to be closer to 100% than he has been. But this is also a huge revenge spot off the game that they should have won in Tucson. The Caleb Love 60-foot buzzer beater to send it to overtime it's definitely going to be on their minds here in this game. And obviously I'm not going to play a game strictly off of a revenge spot or like a motivational spot. Like the schematics are always super important. And I do think they match up pretty well here. And this Iowa State defense is pretty similar to Houston's defense in the way they set up. I faded Arizona when Houston was in Tucson, and that worked out successfully. And yeah, it's a similar setup as Iowa State's going to force you to shoot over the top to beat them. And obviously that's not Arizona's strength. They're 290th nationally in 3-point percentage. And Iowa State's also going to be able to turn over Arizona at a pretty high clip, and they're going to be able to keep them off the glass. And Arizona is 141st in offensive turnover rate, and Iowa State, one of the best in the country. They're 20th on the defensive end in that area. And Iowa State's also top 70 on the defensive glass. So if there's anyone in this league that can keep up with their size, I think it is Iowa State. And it's Iowa State's offense has really been the problem throughout this recent slide. The loss of Oklahoma State was pretty ugly, but that's not the best version of this team. And we've seen this team perform at a super high level on the offensive end when they're at full strength. Their only real loss, I went back through it, their only loss when they've had their entire team at full strength was against Auburn and Maui. And they led that game by 18 and arguably should have won the game. They kind of just ran out of gas there. But I think when they're at full strength, they're easily a top 10 team in the country, if not even top 5 with the upside that they have on the offensive end. But overall, just think it's a good buy low spot, a good motivational spot. And for an Arizona team that I don't love, and I think they're not fantastic on the road. So I think this is a pretty good spot to back the Cyclones.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think Arizona's been pretty fortunate. They're a good team, but I think they've been pretty fortunate as well in some of the spots that they've caught teams like at home. So I think that this is a tough spot for them to go win, especially where Iowa State kind of needs to right the ship a little bit. Our next play, back to the South Carolina picked up their first SEC win last Saturday against my Longhorns. Here we are again, +2 at home against the Arkansas Razorbacks, who also just beat my Longhorns. So tough times for the Longhorns. Anyway, South Carolina +2 against Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, as per Texas, they're in trouble. That performance against Arkansas was. I mean, the performance against South Carolina was pretty horrendous, honestly.
I just say though, Trey Johnson is just otherworldly as a scorer.
Yeah,
the dude.
I was listening to another podcast, and it was like, if Trey Johnson can look like this in a Rodney Terry offense, like, how good is this guy? Like, we could be looking back and seeing this guy as like, how did he not go top 3 in the draft? Is how we kind of could look at it with how good he's been offensively.
The thing about him too, I think, is like he plays so cool, right? He doesn't really get super sped up. He doesn't really seem to show like a ton of emotion, get too high or too low within the game. So, I like him obviously as an offensive player. I've seen flashes too of him showing better like playmaking. That offense, they need him to score. So I think that it doesn't always show through what type of playmaker he's capable of being. So I'm pretty excited for him at the next level.
Yeah, and he's comfortable, and he always looks comfortable. He gets to his spots, and it just always looks like he's taking the shot that he wants to take. Although it could be, a fall away jumper from 20 feet, and you still feel pretty good about it going in. So yeah, definitely credit to him for carrying that Texas offense, albeit they might not end up in the tournament. But yeah, as for this game, South Carolina would back them. I would honestly back them to like any dog price. I think is okay here. And like I said, this is a similar handicap to last Saturday for South Carolina when they played Texas and won. South Carolina, they're still due for some late game regression, especially at home. I know the guard play isn't great on this team, and they turn the ball over quite a bit. But when you're able to compete against Auburn, who they lost by 3 against them, that was the game Janai Broome went down. But it's still a really good effort to be able to hang around with that team. And then other notable close losses were Florida by 1 at the buzzer, Mississippi State by 5 in overtime, and Ole Miss by 4. And they were winning all of those games late, and they could easily have won all 4, albeit, like I said, the guard play isn't fantastic, so it's kind of hard for them to close out games. But I think this team they're viewed, I think, a little bit worse than how their season is really going. I just think they've been a little more unfortunate than people, people kind of view it. And South Carolina, they're the better rebounding team in this game. I think they're better on both sides of the ball, if I'm not mistaken, both offensively and defensively, rebound rate wise. And Arkansas, they're not elite at forcing turnovers, so like I said, with the guard play, they don't really take care of the ball well, but Arkansas is not really going to get after you. And for Arkansas, they're pretty banged up at this point in time with Adu Theoro missing last game and hit with a hyperextended knee, out indefinitely. Not completely sure what that's going to mean for this game, but it does seem like he's going to be out. And then Avicic, he missed some time and looked in last game against Texas, and he looked pretty uncomfortable with his back issues, and I believe his back was spasming at one point in that game. So who knows if he goes? But regardless, like if those guys end up playing, I'd still be on this for anyway, just because I think it's a pretty good sell spot for Arkansas, who their offense has been running pretty hot lately. They've been shooting a little bit over their heads, I believe, and John L. Davis has obviously been playing better, but for him to carry the offense from a shooting perspective, I don't think is like all that sustainable, especially at this point in the season. So yeah, I definitely like South Carolina at any dog price here. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. We've been on South Carolina a few times as dogs, and they've let us down a few times, but also, they've come through, I think, once or twice now, not necessarily with a win, but at least a cover. I remember they covered at home against Texas A&M when I called. I thought it was going to be their first win, but ultimately threw up on themselves late. But yeah, we'll see. I like the spot for them. But the last one, West Virginia plus 8.5 at BYU. Going back to the well with a sell spot on BYU after, we thought that, what was it, Wednesday night was the one, except Arizona State had nobody playing. I mean, they had, I think, you and I playing out there in the starting five. So, but this is a spot I think, BYU, they got to come back to earth a little bit at some point. Would they make 13 threes again the other night?
Yeah, I think it might have been 14. Actually, I think they made like 17 threes. I think they've made 31 in their last two games. And I mean, it was Arizona State just giving them open threes, like walk-in threes.
Yep.
It was very interesting to watch, and they still only won that game by 10. And like you said, like players like you and I were on the floor, and there was actually a player that had as many college points in his career as I do, and that's 0. And he ended up scoring 18 in 24 minutes in this game. Is Trevor Best? He actually looked like the best player on Arizona State's team for like a large portion of this game. So, I mean, that kind of says a lot about where that Arizona State team was at. And I think it's a red flag that Arizona State was able to put up 81 as a team against this BYU defense, who I really don't like this defense at all. I think Kevin Young's done a good job of like maximizing what this defense is, packing it in, trying to limit rim attempts, but I just think the personnel is a little bit lacking. So West Virginia is not like the perfect team to expose them in this area, but they don't really have a guy to guard Javon Small. So if you have to bring too much attention to him, they do have some shooting in like especially Jonathan Powell and Amani Hansberry and like the pick and pop game to expose this BYU defense a little bit. And yeah, and BYU on the offensive end, they're obviously a great shooting team. They're probably one of the best in the country. They're running extremely hot as of late, and they've gotten a lot of like open looks against defenses that will allow them. Like Arizona State obviously had to defend a little bit differently, mixed in a little bit of zone, just a bunch of missed assignments led to open threes. Yeah, 31 of 65 in their last two games. And you're not going to really get those open opportunities against West Virginia. Their defense does a fantastic job defending the arc. They limit catch and shoot opportunities better than really most teams in the entire country. They're in the 9th percentile in catch and shoot frequency allowed per synergy, and they're 98th in the 98th percentile in efficiency against catch and shoot threes. So it's going to be really tough for this team to get any sort of open looks, and they're going to have to knock down some tough catch and shoot opportunities because West Virginia is, and then 94th percentile in guarded catch and shoot frequency. So they're not going to give up any open ones here in this matchup. So, and like I said, West Virginia, they've regressed in league play a little bit, especially on the offensive end, but I really like how they profile as an underdog just with their slow pace, their 329th in adjusted pace per Torvik. And they've shown the ability to hang around in this spot. Like they've had some massive wins over, Gonzaga and Arizona early in the season. Kansas to open up Big 12 play, and they beat Iowa State at home as well when Iowa State was riding extremely high. So they've shown the ability to hang around with these teams, and I think they could bring this down to the final couple possessions and potentially win this thing outright. I know it's really tough to win in Provo, with the elevation, and when you have a lack of depth like West Virginia has, especially in the scoring department, it's going to be tough. But I do think Darian DeVries has a good enough game plan and will not let BYU run on them to, be able to break away in this game.
Yeah. BYU is going to come back to earth at some point. And, I like the angle of the pace here because, like you said, they've been able to hang around against other teams. And if they can kind of run them off the line, expose their defense a little bit, I like the spot. So,
yeah. And they played earlier in the year. BYU won this game by 4, but West Virginia only allowed 6 unguarded catch and shoot opportunities. So, like I said, BYU isn't going to get those freebies from 3, but like Richie Saunders and Trevin Nell, who you can't leave open. I just think West Virginia has the length and athleticism on the wing to make it really tough on them.
Yeah. We also have a few leans we're going to quickly go through before we talk about the money line parlay. First one, Utah -3.5 or better against Arizona State. Utah, of course, fired their coach this week, Craig Smith. But, we like him in this spot.
Yeah, it's mostly just a fate of Arizona State. This line hasn't officially come out yet. And I know projections were sitting around 2 to 2.5, but with the injuries that they've had, I don't really think it's going to come out 2.5. So I would be willing to get this at 3.5 or 4. And yeah, I mean, that Arizona State team just looked just not great at all, especially, they were missing Jaden Quaintance, who is huge for their defense. Adam Miller got hurt during that game. BJ Freeman got cut from the program because of, I don't know, some of his antics that have been going on that dated back to the Arizona game when he, headbutted Caleb Love. And I don't really know what that entire situation was. There was probably some other stuff going on there. And then Alston Mason missed last game. So, I mean, those are really their top 4 players. And if none of those guys play, I don't really see how they can go in elevation and win this game with the lack of depth that they have. They're going to have to rely on Trevor Best to score 18 again and hang around. Like, I just don't see it happening. Yeah. Like, I mean, if I see this come out at 5, I don't know, I might even consider it. I just think it's like a spot for the Sun Devils where if they get down early, they're kind of just going to quit. I just don't really know if this team has any fight left with just the lack of, any sort of depth. And the only concern would be, has Utah given up since Craig Smith got fired? A lot of teams will bounce back and, play with a little more energy after a coach getting fired. They hung around with Arizona for a little bit, but ultimately Arizona against Utah, just the talent gap was a little bit too significant for them. I think in a winnable game, I think they'll be motivated to go out and win it.
Yeah. Our next lean, Marquette -5.5 against Georgetown. I think this one also projects a little bit lower, like 3.5, 4, depending on where you're looking. Is this line out?
I believe this officially came out at 5.5.
Okay.
So it's mostly just a lean. If this thing comes down a little bit, just with, the market being against Marquette a little bit, I just think it's a pretty good matchup. I think they'll be able to turn over Georgetown a ton in this game. And the fact that Thomas Sorber is out for the season, ended up getting foot surgery. He's going to be done. We've talked about it on past podcasts. I believe I faded them with Providence. Didn't work out. Providence is super beat up too. So didn't really factor that in as much as I should have. But their defense kind of falls off a cliff when Sorber isn't on the floor, having to rely on a guy like Drew Fielder to be your rim protector. It really will break down this defense at some point. And I think Marquette, with their rim attack, with their athleticism on the perimeter, to be able to break down this Georgetown defense is something I'm not afraid of, fading this team on the road. So, or actually Georgetown is at home in this game. So I'm just overall definitely like Marquette here to win by margin, just because they can turn them over quite a bit and they can win the extras in this game.
Yeah, for sure. Next lean, Butler, back to the Butler well again, +7. against Villanova. They covered. We had them against St. John's. They covered that one on Wednesday night as well, I believe.
Yeah. I believe they lost by 6. It kind of got dicey there in the last minute after Butler went through one of their classic meltdowns down the stretch. That's kind of been the story of their season. And they're playing against a Villanova team that probably does the same thing that about the same amount of times. Their offense just kind of melts down the stretch. And it's an offense that has been regressing in the second half of league play. Eric Dixon isn't making every shot that he takes anymore. So I think Butler has a really good chance of hanging around. And I think these offenses are pretty equal at this point in time. I just don't really see how they're going to end up getting 7 points in this game. This line also already came out at 7. So I just don't see the gap being that wide between these two teams.
Yeah. Then Sunday, we do have one lean as well. This line's projected Illinois at Michigan, Illinois plus 2.5. Michigan, as we've talked about, it's been super fortunate lately. Hit a game winner at home last night, Amari Burnett. Screw him for not hitting threes earlier in the week to cash our bets. But, big 37-footer last night. But they've been extremely lucky recently. And, I lean this way towards Illinois just because the luck has to stop at some point.
Yeah. I mean, and all of this luck has come against not great teams. I don't really know how many of these games have been against the top half of the Big Ten. But when Michigan State came to town, they lost by double digits, and they just haven't shown the ability to, break away from quality competition at all. I mean, well, they beat Purdue at home, and they beat them by 2. I don't believe they covered that number either. It's been pretty rough for this team, and it's been fortunate end of game situations. I'll credit Dusty May for, he draws up some really good late game stuff, and I don't know about that one last night. I don't know if it was a greatly drawn up design, but it was just Burnett hitting a 30-footer and ended up winning that game. 37-footer. Yeah, sorry. I undersold that. But I also think Illinois is pretty undervalued. As I've talked about a few times, we backed them on Wednesday, I believe, against Iowa. And, playing Iowa is the ultimate get right spot with that defense. But I do think Illinois is headed in the right direction. They're finally getting back to full strength, at least close to it. We're not going to have Marez Johnson here, who would be pretty important against the front line of Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. But Illinois has got to start making more shots here eventually against a Michigan defense that has been breaking down much more lately. That drop coverage has been exposed, and I don't think they're going to be able to play it as much here against the pick and roll combo of Yakachonis and Ivisic. So definitely expect Michigan to switch some things up, either hard hedge ball screens or even play zone. And I don't think those are great propositions against an Illinois team that can hit, catch, and shoot threes when they're open.
Yeah, no, I like this spot for Illinois. Now, the last thing before we wrap things up, an underdog money line parlay. So, Cody, how do you want to do this? You have one, I have one pick.
Yeah, we'll do it that way.
Okay, so you can start with your pick for your half of the parlay. UCSB, led by Stetson Hatter, Steph Swenson.
Yep, and he's actually a big part of this handicap here. And it would be Santa Barbara. This is more projected because the line hasn't officially come out yet, but getting them at plus 200 on the road against Cal State Northridge. And yeah, it's mostly banking on the shot making of Steph Swenson and Cole Anderson, to win over the top of this CSUN defense that is 362nd nationally in 3-point attempt rate against. It's kind of a Nebraska-like defense. They try to just cut off all rim attempts for opposing offenses, and I think that sets up pretty well for Santa Barbara, who is one of the best shooting teams in the country. Swenson is 45% from 3 on the year, and Cole Anderson's 53% on pretty high volume. So they're going to have to either switch some things up or kind of hope that they just don't make open threes in this game. So I just think there's a lot of upside in this game for a team that's probably going to attempt close to 40 threes in this contest. They took 36 in the first game. They went 15 of 36. I believe it was 36 threes to 14 twos. I believe they lost by 7, but if they get hot in this game, they can absolutely win and win by margin on the road.
Yeah, no, I've watched them play a couple times now. Like as crazy as that is to say, staying up late watching them play UC Irvine and other teams out west. But yeah, I definitely don't hate that. My underdog pick, probably unpopular, but I'm gonna take Kentucky on the money line at home against Auburn tomorrow. Um, I really like the spot. I think that Kentucky can do a pretty good job limiting Auburn on the glass. They tend I think they only give up about 10 offensive rebounds a game, which is right around 210th in the country. And they do a really good job on the defensive glass. I think they're seventh in the country in defensive rebounds per game. Now, granted, some of that has to do with pace, so there's more shots going up. But I think they can do a good job in there. And then I like taking a gamble at home with Kentucky shooting. Now, it's going to depend on who's healthy for this game. Lamont Butler fouled out a last game, but he's still limited. Like he's wearing his shoulder brace. He's not the same right now. And Jackson Robinson left the game again. I don't know I don't know what his status is as of yet anyway. So we'll see what happens with that one. But I think shooters like Brea, I think, Butler can knock down some shots. Almanor can knock down some shots. The two freshmen have shown the ability to score the ball a little bit. And then they have, Amari Williams inside and Andrew Carr who can go in and out. So I like Kentucky here, just simply because I think they're capable of like outscoring Auburn at the very least, especially where it's at home. And Auburn, they've won some tough games on the road lately. Tough one at Alabama. So I think that this is a spot where they might let down a little bit. So I'm willing to take the gamble and combine that with UCSB as our money line parlay.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. There's a ton of upside with this Kentucky team. We've seen them win games like this all year long. Against Gonzaga when they were a 6.5 point underdog, they were able to win that game in overtime. Beat Tennessee twice as a dog in both games. They have a couple other wins mixed in there as well. They beat Florida at home. That win has aged extremely well. And we've said it countless times, like they go as their shot making goes. So this is basically a bet on them shooting 35 to 40% from three and being able to stay in it. And yeah, they do rebound extremely well, and they can at least contain Broome and Cardwell on the glass. I don't think they're going to win the rebound battle, but obviously this team has a ton of upside with their shooting ability.
For sure. So, other than that, that's all the bets we have for now. Like I said at the beginning, make sure you join the Discord. That's where you'll find our full card in case anything changes. And other than that, enjoy the games this weekend. Hope our bets all cash, and we got some extra spending money. But enjoy the games. We'll talk to you next time.